It ended with a bang, North Vietnamese tanks crashing through the gates of South Vietnam's presidential palace. All of Saigon that day seemed to erupt in gunfire. The gunfire of celebration. A 30-year war involving first the French and then the Americans was over. For many Vietnamese, it was the defining moment of their lives.
First of all, I was very happy because our country was liberated. And I myself really survived during this cruel, barbarous war.
My family were business owners, and we were very scared of what the communists might do to us. And back then, I couldn't imagine that in just a few years I would become a refugee and my life would change forever.
To the young reporters here, like the Far Eastern Economic Review's Nayan Chanda, the end, when it came with unexpected suddenness.
So the end was near, but I didn't realize it was so near because suddenly I hear a sound, enormous sound coming to the open door, and look at the door and see in the frame of the door a tank crossing the frame of the door, and at the back of the tank flying a red and gold flag. So I said, wow.
South Vietnam had collapsed in only 55 days after a massive offensive. In a bunker 30 kilometers north of Saigon, Commanding General Van Tien Dung and the top brass of the North Vietnamese Army were about to have a party.
When we got the news that the tanks had entered Saigon, a great cheer went up from the bunker. We were all crying with joy and hugging each other. And then we phoned Hanoi to announce our great spring victory.
In Saigon, I watched as the tanks moved through the city. Less than 4 hours earlier, I had watched the last American helicopter leave the roof of the American embassy. Frightened Vietnamese who could not get out beseeched me for help I could not provide.
We don't want to stay here anyway. I understand the Americans are gone.
Yes, I know that, but I must come in case, just in case.
But there's no way because all the helicopters are gone.
Can you help us?
There is no way I can help because we are staying here. We are staying in Saigon.
In a frenzy of panic, some 33,000 Vietnamese had fled with the American embassy, all within 24 hours. Some desperately forcing their way into the embassy grounds. Some of the South Vietnamese Army flew their helicopters to the U.S. fleet off the coast, ditching their aircraft in the sea. Once the Americans were gone, Vietnamese took out their anger in an orgy of destruction. Only a few reporters remained behind as witnesses.
The U.S. embassy behind me has been completely looted. The South Vietnamese obviously are angry at the American withdrawal. Many of them have said that they were left out in the evacuation. They were unable to make the helicopters. Many of them were American employees. They have had to stay, and they will now have to stay and cope with communism in South Vietnam.
But many, of course, could not cope. In the next 7 years, between 1975 and 1982, more than 2 million people fled Vietnam, the largest permanent displacement of refugees since World War II. Thousands of people had homes, businesses confiscated. Tens of thousands more went to re-education camps, some for up to 15 years or until they died. And still more were sent to so-called new economic zones, forced to live in the most basic conditions. For more than 10 years, people continued to flee, up to 20,000 a month, the boat people. 1 in 3 boats attacked by pirates, murders, rapes, untold thousands never made it.
Vietnam, or the communists, the socialists, won the war and they've lost the peace, and I think they know it. They made a number of mistakes. They encountered hardships that they didn't expect.
They also encountered more war, Vietnamese troops invaded Cambodia, overthrew the hated dictator Pol Pot, and stayed on there for 10 years. And China, a former ally, invaded Vietnam.
History will eventually bring them before the bar of justice.
China said it was going to teach Vietnam a lesson for its invasion of Cambodia.
I think the Chinese in the end got punished because Chinese took heavy casualty, up to 50,000 casualty Chinese took.
Still, the Vietnamese and their economy suffered.
A huge proportion of the Vietnamese adult male population wound up either on the border with China or fighting against the Chinese-sponsored Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. And this was then male labor force that was not available for more productive activity.
It was not until 1988 that Vietnam finally put the war behind it. Hanoi's leaders launched Doi Moi, a policy of economic reform. Finally, Vietnam began to grow, to prosper. With privatization, growth surged to 8% a year. Foreign investment and overseas Vietnamese were attracted back. As one writer put it, in Vietnam, the present is complex, the past uncertain, but the future is glorious.